It was Friday night at TechSpire headquarters in Silicon Valley, and the product launch gala for their new AI sparkled like a fashion runway. The 60-story glass tower glittered under chandeliers, reflecting off sharp tuxedos and silk evening gowns. Smooth jazz saxophone drifted through the air, blending with the scent of luxury perfume and the soft clinking of wine glasses. In the corner of the lobby, a decorative chessboard had been set up more as an accessory than an activity, but it quickly became the center of attention. Young engineers showed off their tactical flair, while the executives proudly showed how to lose with a smile. Leo Marshall, the 35-year-old CEO of TechSpire, stood at the center of the crowd. Tall, with tousled brown hair that looked like he'd just finished a run, he wore his dress shirt untucked in a way that was intentionally careless. He held a wine glass in one hand, his friendly smile contrasted by eyes sharp enough to debug code with a glance. "Thanks for coming, everyone," Leo spoke into the mic, his voice booming across the space. "Our new AI is going to change the way the world works. But before we change the world, let me change the mood tonight. Who's brave enough to play a game of chess with me?" Laughter erupted across the hall. Several hands shot up. A young engineer with thick glasses shouted, "Me, boss!" Leo shook his head, pretending to be serious. No. You've still got bugs to fix in my code. I want a real opponent. Someone unexpected." He turned, scanning the crowd until his gaze landed in the far corner of the room. A petite figure was pushing a cleaning cart, its wheels squeaking against the marble floor. "Hey, you! The girl with the trash bin!" Leo pointed, grinning playfully. "Feel like a game of chess?" Silence fell over the room. All eyes turned toward the woman. Dani Rivera, 28, dressed in the standard blue janitor uniform, her dark hair tied in a neat ponytail, held a damp kitchen cloth, still sudsy with soap. She paused, raised her head, and locked eyes with Leo. Calm and unwavering, she replied, "Absolutely, sir. But just a warning, I'm not very good at losing." Her voice was gentle, but laced with something razor-sharp, like the first calculated move of a well-planned opening. Murmurs stirred through the room. A marketing director whispered to his assistant, "Who is she? A janitor challenging the CEO to chess?" Another engineer snickered, "She probably thinks the pieces are just decoration." But Dani didn't flinch. She walked up to the board and sat across from Leo, every step slow and deliberate, radiating quiet confidence. She glanced at the board and chose the black pieces. Leo raised an eyebrow and sat down, flashing a wide grin. "Black pieces? You're letting me go first? Bold move, miss. What was it?" "Dani," she answered, placing her cleaning rag on the corner of the table like it was a trophy. "And I'm not letting you. I just like a challenge." The crowd began to gather around the board, phones raised for an internal live stream. Leo opened with pawn to E4 confident, like a general launching a battle. Dani countered with knight to F3, a sly move that earned a few surprised oohs from the onlookers. By the fifth move, Leo was tapping his fingers on the table, his smile fading. By the 10th, he frowned, muttering, "What are you doing with that rook?" Dani only smiled, nudging a pawn forward with a relaxed tone. "Just clearing the way, sir, like I do with the floors." On the 19th move, the room was completely silent. Dani slid her rook across the 8th rank and locked eyes with Leo. "Checkmate, sir." A wine glass slipped from a director's hand, spilling red across the white floor. A nearby engineer gaped, nearly dropping his phone. Leo stared at the board, then at Dani, his mouth open like he was about to speak, but only managed a faint, "Huh?" Dani rose, wiped her hands on the kitchen cloth, moving as calmly as if she'd just brewed a cup of coffee. "Thanks for the game, sir," she said. "The 45th floor is waiting for me." She pushed her cart away, its wheels squeaking behind her, leaving the room stunned as if they'd just witnessed a magic trick. Leo remained seated, white king in hand, staring at it like it had betrayed him. His pride, the very force that had helped him build TechSpire into a tech giant, had just been crushed in 19 moves by a janitor. And yet beneath the shock, something stirred inside him, a strange excitement. "Who is she?" He turned to his assistant, voice urgent. "That girl, what's her name? Her file?" The assistant scrambled, swiping through a tablet. D. Rivera, janitorial staff, 45th floor, sir. No photo, no additional details. Leo shook his head, mumbling, wrong. She just taught me how to lose a game without opening a book. He stood slowly, eyes still fixed on the door Danny had exited through. Where'd you learn to play like that? He called out, trying to salvage his dignity. Harvard? Danny paused at the doorway, glanced back and gave a fleeting smile. No, sir. In a basement storage room, with my father. And then she disappeared, leaving Leo alone with a hurricane of questions. In that moment, under the gala lights and the soft jazz, Leo knew he had just met an opponent, not just on the board. And Danny, with her old wooden chess box in her bag, knew she had just made her opening move in a far bigger game. You're watching Soul Stories, where every story whispers of love, healing, and hope. Let us know which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and be a part of our journey. Now, stay with us. The story is just beginning. Saturday morning bathed the 60th floor CEO office of TechSpire in golden sunlight, overlooking the sprawl of Silicon Valley low rooftops scattered among glittering tech towers. Inside, the spacious room was minimalist. A walnut desk, a bookshelf crammed with titles on AI and strategy, and a large screen displaying revenue charts. But the focus this morning wasn't on billion-dollar numbers. It was on Leo, slouched in his chair, hair even messier than usual, clutching a cold cup of coffee and staring at his laptop. Last night at the launch gala for their new AI, Leo's ego, the very force that had propelled TechSpire to the top, had been shattered by Danny Rivera, a janitor, in just 19 moves. 19. That number looped in his mind like a buggy line of code. He'd replayed the match a dozen times in his head, searching for the exact moment he slipped. But every replay ended with the image of Danny calmly wiping her hands on a kitchen cloth and saying, "The 45th floor is waiting for me." No way, Leo muttered, typing furiously on his laptop as he tore through the employee database. The screen lit up with hundreds of profiles, but he only cared about one, D. Rivera. When he finally found it, he practically shouted, "What the hell is this?" The file was suspiciously sparse, just the name D. Rivera, a start date, and a title, Janitorial Staff, 45th Floor. No photo, no contact info, no background. It was like she was a ghost, existing only to mop floors and destroy CEOs at chess. Leo slammed the intercom. "Tina, up here, now." 5 minutes later, Tina, the head of HR, walked in, dressed in a perfectly pressed navy blazer and holding a tablet. "Sir, what's going on?" she asked, trying to keep her tone professional, though clearly puzzled by a weekend summons. "D. Rivera," Leo said, pointing at the screen. "Who is she? I want everything on her. Right now." Tina scrolled through her tablet, frowning. "D. Rivera, she's one of the janitors on the 45th floor, sir. Works the night shift. Temporary contract. Nothing unusual." Leo shot to his feet, nearly spilling his coffee. "Nothing unusual?" he nearly shouted. "She just taught me how to lose a chess game in 19 moves at last night's gala." 19? And you're calling that nothing unusual? Tina blinked, flustered. I didn't know she played chess, sir. Her file is admittedly lacking. Maybe because she's temp staff, we didn't require much documentation." Leo rubbed his temples, trying to stay calm. "Tina, do you know I run a billion-dollar company? I've negotiated with investors, spoken at international conferences, and now I can't sleep because of a chess game with a janitor. Does that seem normal to you?" Tina bit her lip, fighting back a smile. "I'll look into her file again, sir. But maybe she's just good at chess?" Leo waved her off and turned back to his screen. She's not just good at chess. She silenced an entire gala with a rook and a smirk. And I need to know why." He typed a few more commands, but the system only returned. No additional data found. Leo sighed. "Wrong, Tina. She's not a janitor. She's the person who just taught me how to lose without ever opening a book." While Leo struggled with Danny's file, on the 45th floor, Danny was quietly pushing her cleaning cart through the empty hallway, fluorescent lights reflecting off her blue uniform. She knew Leo would come looking for her. That was the point of the chess game. Her opening move wasn't just about winning, but about catching the attention of the only person in the company with access to the data she needed, Leo Marshall. But he couldn't know too much, not yet. Danny paused in front of a large glass pane, wiped away a smudge, and muttered under her breath, "Keep searching, Mr. CEO, but don't expect me to make things easy." She smiled sharp and knowing like the one she wore when she slid her rook across the 8th rank. Back on the 60th floor, Leo shut his laptop and stood, gazing out over Silicon Valley. A thought struck him. In 3 years as CEO, he had never once paid attention to people like Danny, the invisible ones who scrubbed the floors, emptied the trash, and kept TechSpire spotless. "What else have I missed?" he murmured, curiosity slowly overtaking his bruised pride. He picked up the phone and called his assistant. "Get me Dee Rivera's work schedule. I want to meet her. No, not in the boardroom. On the 45th floor hallway if I have to." He hung up, took a sip of his cold coffee, and muttered, "Miss Rivera, you owe me an explanation, and maybe a rematch." Late at night on the 45th floor of TechSpire headquarters, the entire floor lay in shadow except for a faint desk lamp, glowing in a small meeting room at the end of the hallway. The room was bare, furnished only with a chipped wooden table, a few wobbly plastic chairs, and a whiteboard covered in half-finished AI equations. On the table sat a chessboard, its wooden pieces gleaming under the warm yellow light, like silent witnesses to an untold story. The click of chess pieces echoed in rhythm with the soft whir of an old ceiling fan, creating an atmosphere both intimate and mysterious, as if this wasn't just a game, but a wordless conversation. Leo Marshall sat on one side of the table, sleeves rolled up, his tousled hair looking like he'd just run through a storm. His hazel eyes sparkled with curiosity. Across from him sat Danny Rivera, still in her blue janitorial uniform, though her cleaning rag was folded neatly beside her, revealing her slender, determined hands. Her father's old wooden chess box rested on the table, like a quiet friend observing every move. This was the 3rd night in a row Leo had invited Danny to play after hours, and the 3rd night he tried to understand the woman who had defeated him in just 19 moves at last week's gala. "You go first," Leo said, sliding the white pieces toward her, a half-playful smile on his face, though his eyes never left hers. "I'd rather not get checkmated again." Danny raised an eyebrow and, as always, chose black. "I prefer black," she replied, her tone calm but teasing. "It forces me to think harder, like cleaning floors. You have to plan your path so you don't miss a single corner." She pushed her pawn to D5, her finger gliding smoothly over the polished piece. When she looked up, her eyes accidentally met Leo's. Her heart gave a faint tremble, but she quickly masked it with a faint smile. Leo chuckled, responding with a knight move. "So now chess is like floor mopping? You really are a poetic janitor." But as the game progressed, he fell silent, pulled into the intensity of Danny's focus. Every move she made felt like a sentence in a story. When she advanced her rook, her fingers brushed his just as he reached for the same piece. They both flinched, their eyes locking for a brief moment. Leo's heartbeat quickened. Danny's breath caught in her throat. She pulled her hand back, adjusting a piece to hide her nerves, a blush faintly blooming on her cheeks under the dim light. After the first match, Danny won with a daring queen sacrifice. Leo leaned back in his chair with a sigh, admiration glowing in his eyes. "All right, Miss Rivera," he said self-deprecatingly. "You destroyed me, but I propose a deal. One story for every match. Anything. I want to know where you learned to play chess and how you make me feel so damn incompetent." Danny hesitated, fingers brushing the black king, feeling the warmth of the worn wood. She knew Leo was trying to dig deeper, and she needed him, the only person with enough clearance to access the archived data from TechSpire, where her father had once worked. But the sincerity in his gaze, seated close enough that she could feel the soft warmth of his breath, made her heart waver. "All right," she said gently, "but just small stories. And you'll have to share too, Mr. CEO." Leo nodded eagerly, his eyes lighting up like a child offered candy. "Deal. You first." Danny set her piece down and gazed out the dark window, her eyes shadowed with memory. My dad taught me chess when I was little, she began, her voice slow, as if unlocking an old door. He wasn't a pro, but he loved the game because it was like life. He used to say, Danny, sometimes you have to sacrifice the queen to protect a pawn, because if that pawn walks the right path, it can become anything. That's where I learned sacrifice. She paused, fingers tightening slightly around a piece, her eyes glistening, but she hid it behind a smile. Your turn. Leo blinked, a twinge in his chest at the sadness that flickered across her face. He offered up a clumsy story, how he nearly fell asleep during his first board meeting as CEO because he'd stayed up all night playing chess online. Danny laughed, soft and rare, like lamplight warming a cold room. Leo stared at her, heart-stirring. Her laughter felt like the most valuable thing he'd ever heard. In the second match, Danny's voice softened further. My dad worked at a tech company a long time ago. He liked coding at night in an old server room, said the hum of the machines was like music. Sometimes he'd let me sit beside him and play chess on a board we made out of bottle caps. She paused. When both of them reached for a piece at the same time, her fingers brushed his again. This time neither of them pulled away quickly. Their eyes met, and Danny's heart raced. Leo's breath hitched slightly. Then she asked quietly, does TechSpire still have those old server rooms? The data from that era, it was special, wasn't it? Leo, still caught in the afterglow of that touch, answered without thinking. Yeah, in the basement, but they're mostly abandoned now. Only exec-level access or the original builders can get in. He looked up and saw how intently Danny was watching him, and his heart stirred again. He wasn't sure if it was from the question or from her eyes. Why do you ask? He said, voice low. Danny shrugged, sliding her rook with subtle precision. Just curious. Check, Mr. CEO. Leo looked down, realizing he'd lost again, but he only smiled. Losing to her was starting to feel natural. In the third game, Danny dismantled him with a sequence that felt like a chess engine at work. Leo leaned back with a groan. Are you sure you're not some undercover AI? Because I'm being absolutely annihilated. Danny grinned, setting down her knight. Her fingers touched his again as she gathered the pieces. This time neither of them moved. Their eyes locked. For a fleeting moment, their hearts beat in sync. Danny's voice came out light, almost mischievous, hiding the tremble beneath. Nope, just a janitor who knows how to move a knight. You should try mopping floors, Mr. CEO. Teaches you patience. Leo laughed, but something deeper clicked into place inside him. Her stories about her father, the tech company, the data, they weren't just anecdotes. She was searching for something, and he wanted to help, not just out of curiosity, but because there was a strange closeness growing between them. He didn't press her. Instead, he looked at her with quiet sincerity and said, Ms. Rivera, you make me want to keep playing, even knowing I'll lose. Danny looked at him. Her heart stirred not because of his words, but because of his gaze. He saw her not as a janitor, but as Danny, the daughter of a man who once dreamed through code and chess. She stood, folding her rag and tucking away her chess box. Thank you for the games, Mr. CEO, she said softly. But I really do have floors to clean. Leo watched her leave, feeling like he'd just played a game whose rules he didn't fully understand, but somehow his heart already knew every move. Ms. Rivera, he called after her, voice low. Same time, same place tomorrow? Danny glanced back, her smile faint but bright, eyes gleaming. If you're not afraid of losing again. She walked away, leaving Leo with the board and a heart learning how to fall, one move at a time. Top of form, bottom of form, basement level. B3 of TechSpire headquarters was a graveyard of technology, rows of aging servers, humming like ghosts, whispering the company's origin story. Flickering indicator lights cast eerie glows over tangled cables dangling like cobwebs. The air was thick with the scent of dust and rusted metal, and the low whir of the fans echoed like a mechanical chant. In the far corner, a rusted metal desk held up an ancient CRT monitor, its sickly green glow lighting Danny Rivera's face. She sat there in her janitor uniform, hair tightly tied back, brown eyes locked in sharp focus. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with the intensity of a chess player planning her final strike. Beside her sat her father's old wooden chess box, silent and still, like a trusted companion. Danny knew she didn't have access to the system Leo had said during one of their midnight games, that only the executive board could get into the archived data. But she wasn't waiting for a miracle. Last week, while cleaning the office of Tom, a senior engineer who often worked late, she noticed he'd left his laptop open. A post-it note stuck to the screen read, Tien Nguyen, Codemaster. Tom once joked, Danny, you clean floors better than I write code. With her sharp memory, Danny had filed the credentials away without raising suspicion. Tom's account got her through the front door, but when she tried to access the legacy server system, a window popped up. Administrative clearance required. Danny had almost given up until one night. While cleaning the server room, she found a slip of paper taped under a keyboard, scrawled in smudged ink, Temp Admin, Rivera Rocks. The name Rivera stopped her cold like a ghost from the past. Her father, Engineer Rivera, had worked here when TechSpire was just finding its legs. Could it be? A message left behind, waiting all these years? She typed in the password, and to her astonishment, it worked, unlocking a series of old directories, some still intact. TechSpire, a billion-dollar company, using post-its for admin access, she muttered, shaking her head. Dad, this place needs more than just floor cleaning. It needs debugging. That night, using Tom's login in Rivera Rocks, Danny slipped past layer after layer of security. Command lines crawled across the screen, slow and deliberate, like an opening chess sequence. After hours of combing through archive folders, her breath caught. A file appeared, AI Prototype Rivera. She clicked. Lines upon lines of code flooded the screen, her father's handwriting translated into machine language. He had built this. She remembered the algorithms. He'd taught them to her using chess metaphors when she was 23, when TechSpire was just beginning. But as she scrolled down to the author tag, her blood ran cold. Rivera had been replaced, Frank Lin. The edit log confirmed it. The change had been made 3 years ago when her father was still alive, but too ill to oversee his project. Frank, once her father's prized mentee, had stolen everything. Not just the code, the credit, the legacy. It was as if her father had never existed. Danny's grip on the mouse tightened. Her vision blurred. She remembered the evenings spent over chessboards in their tiny apartment. Her father would say, Sometimes, Danny, you sacrifice the queen to protect a pawn, because a pawn, when it walks far enough, becomes anything. He had spoken of Frank Lin back then, a bright, eager student he loved like a son. But in his final year, her father's eyes dimmed whenever Frank's name came up, full of quiet pain. Being smart isn't enough, Danny, he once told her, placing the king gently on the board. You have to play fair. Now she understood. Frank had used her father's weakness to steal the work and used it to rise to the top, becoming TechSpire's CTO through deception. Dad, I found it, Danny whispered, her voice shaking. Though this system's slower than my trash cart. She let out a dry laugh to keep the fury at bay. She plugged in a USB drive and began copying the source code and edit logs. As the progress bar inched forward, so did the weight in her chest, the pain of betrayal, not just of work, but of trust. Her father's trust. But now she would respond the way he had taught her. Not with anger, but on the board. She double-checked the files, wiped her access logs with clinical precision, like executing the final move of a game. Then she slipped the USB into her pocket, the chess box still at her side. Above, on TechSpire's top floor, Leo Marshall was beginning to suspect Frank Lin. At a recent meeting, Frank had grown visibly tense when a junior engineer suggested reviewing early company data. He brushed it off quickly. That stuff's ancient history, but his uneasy glance hadn't escaped Leo. Something felt off. Danny had asked him about the old server rooms too. He didn't know the full story yet, but instinct told him Danny and Frank were connected, and the past was beginning to resurface. As Danny exited the server room, the fans behind her hummed faintly, fading into silence. She stepped into the dim hallway, her fingers brushing the outline of the USB in her pocket. The air was heavy, but her mind was razor sharp. A new game had begun, and Frank Lin was about to face the consequence of a move he made 3 years ago. You thought you won, Frank, she murmured, a cold smile ghosting across her lips. But my father always said, traders lose on the final move. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. The HR office on TechSpire's 20th floor felt more like an interrogation room, cold, sterile, and too bright. Fluorescent lights washed the gray walls and Formica desk in a harsh white glow. The only sounds were the soft rustle of papers and the clack of keyboard keys, echoing in the tense air. Dani Rivera stood in the center of the room, still in her janitor uniform, clutching her father's old wooden chest box tightly in one hand. Her sharp brown eyes masked the storm raging inside. On the screen in front of her, a grainy security video looped repeatedly. Dani, alone in the B3 server basement, typing under the flickering green light of a CRT monitor. Tina, the impeccably dressed head of HR in her navy blazer, pushed her glasses up and spoke in a firm, clipped tone. Ms. Rivera, this footage shows you accessing the legacy server system without proper authorization. This is a serious security violation. Do you have an explanation? Dani stood tall, steady, though she knew this was a misstep, a mistake in her carefully calculated plan. A security guard had apparently reviewed the cameras and flagged her for staying in the basement too long. She had erased her digital tracks, used engineer Tom's credentials, and the River Rocks post-it password, but she hadn't accounted for surveillance footage. One careless move, and the whole game shifted. Still, she showed no panic. I was just checking something. Work-related, she replied calmly. I'm a janitor, not a hacker. Tina frowned and flipped to another sheet. The login used belongs to Tom Nguyen, who claims he never shared it. You used his account, didn't you? TechSpire doesn't tolerate security breaches, Ms. Rivera. Dani pressed her lips together, silent. In her pocket, the USB drive still held her father's stolen AI code, and the edit logs proof that Frank Lin had taken full credit for her father's work 3 years ago. She could hand it to Tina now, but that wasn't her way. She wanted to face Frank herself. So she said nothing. Tina sighed and slid a termination letter across the desk. I'm sorry, but your contract is being terminated, effective immediately. You have 1 hour to collect your things and leave the premises. Dani looked at the letter. A wave of helplessness washed over her, but pride kept her spine straight. She didn't sign it. She only nodded, her voice dry but composed. Thanks for the heads up. The 45th floor will be cleaner without me. She turned to leave but paused at the door. With a wry smile, she added, and thanks for the free coffee in the break room. It tastes better than my monthly paycheck. Tina blinked, momentarily speechless. Dani walked out, her chest box held like a shield. On the 60th floor, Leo's office was drenched in warm afternoon light, but his mind was tangled like broken code. Behind his walnut desk, he sat with his hair tousled and eyes fixed on the USB drive Dani had quietly left for him that morning. It came with a handwritten note. Mr. CEO, this is the truth, but I want to finish it myself. Please don't interfere. He plugged it in. When the file AI Prototype Rivera appeared on screen, his eyes widened. Thousands of lines of code, the very foundation of TechSpire's groundbreaking AI, carried the signature Rivera. But the edit logs told another story. 3 years ago, Franklin had replaced that signature with his own. Leo rubbed his temples. A memory surfaced. Years ago, when TechSpire launched its flagship AI project, it became a sensation. Rivera, the lead engineer, had built the core algorithms. Then he got sick, and Frank, his mentee, took over, managing final integrations and investor presentations. Frank was hailed as the genius who completed the system and was promoted to CTO. Rivera faded from memory. Leo had believed it. At the time, it made sense. But now, staring at the code on Dani's USB, Leo saw the truth. Rivera had completed the entire project architecture, logic, and deployment before he got sick. Frank had added a few interface tweaks and stolen the legacy. Who are you, Rivera? Leo muttered as he pulled up Dani's personnel file again. It held only the name, D. Rivera, no photo, no history. His eyes caught the file name, AI_prototype_Rivera. A realization hit him like lightning. His heart skipped a beat. No way, he whispered. She's Rivera's daughter. He remembered that night Danny defeating him in 19 moves at the gala. The proud look in her eyes. The calm way she placed each piece on her father's old chess box. He'd sensed something then, that she was more than a janitor. She had mentioned her father once worked in tech, and now Leo remembered. Years ago, Rivera had spoken of a daughter who loved chess. He'd never met her. But now it was clear, Danny had come to TechSpire to reclaim what Frank had stolen from her father. Leo stood and stared out at the sweeping view of Silicon Valley, reeling. 3 years ago, there had been a flagged incident, unauthorized access to the legacy server. Frank had brushed it off, blaming a careless intern. Now Leo realized it was Frank covering his tracks after removing Rivera's name. He could go public now, expose Frank, strip him of his title, restore Rivera's credit. The USB was enough, but Danny's note stopped him. "I want to finish it myself." What was she planning? Back on the 20th floor, Danny stepped out of the elevator. Her cleaning card had been handed over. She didn't look back. In her chest was a vow. "Frank, you stole my father's work, but you won't steal his honor." She ran her hand over the wooden chess box, remembering her father's voice. "A pawn, if it keeps going, can become anything." She smiled, not like someone who'd just been fired, but like a chess player who just captured her opponent's queen. Leo Marshall's 60th floor office at TechSpire was a controlled chaos of ideas and intent. Stacks of paperwork rose like miniature Himalayas across his walnut desk, nestled between cold coffee cups and a hastily set up wooden chessboard. On his laptop screen, the rules of the TechSpire Grand Chess Cup glowed back at him, the company's annual chess tournament, where engineers flexed their strategy skills and executives flexed their flair. Frank Lin had won it 3 years in a row. Sunlight spilled through the glass windows, illuminating Leo's tousled hair and the gleam in his eyes, half worry, half mischief. He was still reeling from the truth. Danny was the daughter of Rivera, the senior engineer Leo had admired during TechSpire's early years. But her note, the one she'd left with the USB, had stopped him from going public. "I want to handle it myself. Please don't interfere." Leo decided to honor that. "She's a player," he thought, "so I'll bring her into the game." He scanned the tournament regulations and frowned. The current rules only allowed active employees to participate, technically disqualifying Danny, who'd been terminated. But then his eyes lit up. A loophole. The rules could be amended before the tournament, and as CEO, he had the authority to propose changes. He started typing. "Any former employee who has worked at least 180 days within the past 12 months may be invited to participate as an honorary contender." Danny had logged over 200 days before her dismissal. That made her eligible. Leo grinned. "This one's for you, Miss Rivera." The move felt clever, like a night leap over corporate barriers, but it was risky. If it failed, or worse, if Frank suspected Danny's intentions, the entire plan could collapse. Luckily, Frank still didn't know Danny was Rivera's daughter. He probably still thought of her as a janitor who broke the rules. He's in for a shock, Leo thought, heart racing. He reviewed the new clause one more time. The knight jumps over obstacles, he reminded himself. And this one just made a beautiful move. He sent out the company-wide email announcing the update and couldn't resist adding a cheeky final line. "Have fun playing, and don't let your rook take your king." With a smirk, he clicked send. "Ms. Rivera," he said to himself, "I'm learning a bit of sarcasm from you." But deep down, he knew this wasn't just clever fun, this was leadership. He wasn't imposing control. He was creating space. And that made him feel, for the first time in a while, like the CEO he wanted to be. In a small apartment a few miles from TechSpire, Danny sat at her worn kitchen table, her father's wooden chess box open in front of her. She was replaying an old match of his, moving each piece as though hearing his voice again. Face your enemy with intellect, not emotion. The sting of being fired still lingered, but she hadn't lost her fire. The USB she'd left with Leo was enough to expose Frank, but she didn't want the story to end like that. She wanted to beat Frank the way her father had taught him, through chess, through code, through truth. But that chance had seemed gone. She never expected Leo would do anything. Then her phone buzzed, an email from TechSpire. She opened it and her heart raced. A new clause in the Grand Chess Cup rules. Former employees with 180 days of service were now eligible. She whispered, stunned, "Leo, what are you doing?" Warmth spread through her chest. She hadn't imagined this kind of support, not from a CEO. It wasn't just permission. It was a door quietly unlocked, an invitation to step forward. He cleared the path. "But I have to win the game." Danny set the king piece down and smiled. "Thank you, Mr. CEO, for this chance, but this match is mine." She began preparing. Frank would never see it coming, and he definitely didn't know yet that she was the daughter of the man he betrayed. On the 50th floor, Frank Lynn's office gleamed with glass and sleek decor, an embodiment of his ego. Immaculately dressed, Frank was reviewing revenue forecasts when Leo's email pinged onto his screen. He skimmed the new rules. "Former employees?" He smirked. "What's this little stunt, Leo?" But he didn't care. The Grand Chess Cup was his domain, his stage. Three-time champion. He'd crushed engineers, directors, even the former COO. Let them come, he thought. No one's taking this from me. He barely remembered Danny, just a janitor who'd gotten herself fired for poking around. An aunt, not worth a second glance. The name on the new rule didn't even register. He tossed his phone aside and muttered, "Let Leo have his little drama. The trophy's still mine." He had no idea his arrogance had just put him in position for check. Back on the 60th floor, Leo scrolled through replies from other executives. Everyone approved the rule change. He leaned back in his chair, picked up a knight from the chessboard on his desk, and whispered, "Miss Rivera, I've moved you into the match. Now it's your turn to shine." He knew there were risks, but for the first time, his power as CEO didn't feel like control. It felt like permission. Leadership isn't about standing at the top, he thought. It's about helping others find the right move. He smiled and waited to see what Danny would do with the board he'd helped clear. Chapter 7, The Return of the Janitor. The TechSpire Grand Chess Cup Arena looked like a miniature Roman Colosseum, white faux marble pillars, dramatic stage lighting, and rows of chessboards arranged like miniature battlegrounds. A giant screen loomed above, live streaming every move from every match. The buzz of excited chatter filled the air. Engineers, directors, interns, all waiting to see if Frank Lynn, three-time reigning champion, would dominate yet again. And then Danny Rivera walked in. No silk gown, no spotlight, just a black t-shirt, faded jeans, and worn-out sneakers. In her hand, she carried her father's old wooden chess box, its scuffed surface glowing faintly under the lights like a relic of quiet rebellion. Her hair was tied up neatly, her brown eyes were fierce, but her expression was oddly calm. Her heart beat fast, not with fear, but with purpose. Today was her chance to reclaim her father's name. A wave of mocking whispers rippled through the crowd. "Is that the janitor? Didn't she get fired? Did she come to clean the chessboards?" Danny didn't flinch. "I'm here for Frank," she thought. "No one else matters." She strode confidently toward the tournament floor, where the early rounds were about to begin. Frank Lynn sat near the center, pressed and polished in his tailored suit, his usual smug smile in place. He blinked when he saw Danny, but quickly dismissed her. He remembered her as the janitor who'd humiliated Leo at the gala, but he wasn't Leo. He was the reigning champion. She was nothing. What he didn't know was that she was Rivera's daughter, the daughter of the man he betrayed. Danny took her seat at one of the bracket tables and opened the chess box. She placed each piece with slow, deliberate reverence. Then, with a glance at Frank, she said coolly, "You here to play chess or relearn how to lose?" Laughter rippled from nearby tables. Frank's smile faltered. He clenched his fists under the table. "You should watch your tone, Rivera," he said, his voice silk but sharp. "Chess isn't for amateurs." Danny set down her black king with a soft click and replied, "This box is old, but at least it's more loyal than some people." The room erupted. A nearby engineer spilled his coffee, and the giant screen zoomed in on Danny's flicker of a smile. Frank narrowed his eyes. Her composure rattled him. He told himself she was just a loudmouth, but her eyes, they reminded him of someone. In a shadowed corner of the room, Leo Marshall stood among a few executives, hands in his pockets, heart pounding like a drum roll. He was proud and nervous. He looked up at the screen and caught Danny's proud gaze. "You've got this, Ms. Rivera. I'm dying over here, but you've got this." The early rounds began. Danny tore through them. Round 1. She sacrificed her queen in a stunning bait and trap, taking down a seasoned engineer. The room gasped. Round 2. She dismantled the marketing director in 25 moves, calmly remarking, "Thanks for the match. You should work on your nights." Round 3. She crushed a cocky programmer from the 30th floor who had dubbed himself the King of Code. He left muttering, "She's not human." By the third round, the whispers had changed. "She's not just a janitor." Frank also cruised through his matches, cool and mechanical. But he was watching Danny now. She was better than he expected. Still, he told himself, she won't beat me. No one does. But a seed of dread had taken root. Then came the final match. The big screen flashed the names. Danny Rivera versus Frank Lynn. The crowd gasped. Danny stepped to the center table and opened the wooden box. She chose black. Frank sat across from her, perfectly pressed, trying to hold on to his usual grin, but his eyes flickered. Danny didn't flinch. "Ms. Rivera," he said, voice smooth but snide. "Didn't think you'd get this far. Ready to lose?" Danny stared straight at him. "You go first." She sat, silent but focused, a player with a mission. Around them, the entire company held its breath. Everyone knew this wasn't just a chess match. It was a silent war for truth. Frank opened with pawn to e4 classic, arrogant. Danny answered with knight to f3. Frank blinked. That move. He'd seen it before, from someone else. "Move 10. Frank frowned. "Move 20. Sweat trickled down his neck. Danny's playstyle was terrifyingly familiar, patient, strategic, ruthless when it mattered. She played like Rivera. "Move 39. Silence fell. Danny sacrificed her queen. The room gasped. Then she advanced her rook, pressuring Frank's king. The camera zoomed in. Frank froze. That exact queen sacrifice, Rivera had used it on him once. As a teaching moment. Years ago. It couldn't be. "Move 42. Danny's rook slid to the back rank. "Checkmate." The hall fell into silence, then exploded in applause. Frank stared at the board, white as paper, hands trembling. Danny rose slowly, looked him in the eyes, and said softly, "Mr. Rivera sends his final lesson." Frank's lips trembled. Who are you?" Danny met his gaze with a steady voice. "Danny, Rivera's daughter." Gasps swept through the room like a wave. Frank sank into his chair, pale and hollow. His past, his betrayal, now public and undeniable. He stood, shoulders hunched, and walked off the stage without a word. His spotlight had gone out. Danny watched him go, victory bittersweet. She had honored her father, but it wouldn't bring him back. Still, she had done what she came to do. She turned to the crowd, raised an eyebrow, and said dryly, "Thanks for watching. I'll go clean the floors now." Laughter burst out, followed by thunderous applause. Someone shouted, "She's the queen of chess!" Danny only smiled, quietly tucking the chess pieces back into the box. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with pride. As the crowd dispersed, Danny walked toward the corner where Leo stood. He hadn't moved. His eyes were lit with pride, hands still in his pockets. When she reached him, they simply looked at each other. No words, just trust, and a shared heartbeat. Leo smiled gently. "Ms. Rivera, I knew you'd make the whole world stop and look." Danny nodded, her eyes glowing. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Leo standing there, his heart full. The live stream still buzzed with commentary, but Danny stood alone now, her hand resting on the worn wooden chess box. "Dad," she whispered, "I did it." This victory wasn't just 42 moves. It was legacy. It was redemption. It was the proof that a single pawn, if it keeps moving forward, can change the whole game. The executive boardroom on the 60th floor of TechSpire bore the weight of a courtroom. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls offered a panoramic view of Silicon Valley, bathed in the morning sun. But inside, the atmosphere was tense, only the soft hum of the air conditioner and the rustle of paper filled the silence. At the polished walnut table sat the company's top executives, faces tight with unease, as a large screen flickered to life at the head of the room. Donnie Rivera stood at the front, no corporate blazer, just a plain black t-shirt and worn jeans. Beside her sat her father's weathered wooden chess box, silent and steady, like a witness to history. In her hand was a USB drive, the one that contained the original AI source code and the edit logs. Her final move, her father's redemption. She plugged it in. The file AI prototype Rivera appeared on the screen. Thousands of lines of code scrolled by core algorithms her father had written 5 years ago, when TechSpire was just an idea and Rivera was its visionary. Danny's voice was calm but razor-sharp. "This is my father's work. Rivera completed it before he fell ill, but Frank Lin deleted his name and replaced it with his own to take credit and become CTO." She clicked. The screen displayed the edit logs, time-stamped, precise. "At the time of this change, my father was too weak to fight back. Frank used that moment to manipulate the code and steal everything." Her voice dropped. "TechSpire credits Frank with the success of this AI, but my father, he built it from the ground up. Frank just added a UI and claimed the throne, and worse, he betrayed the man who treated him like a son." The room went still. The directors looked at each other, some staring down at papers as if to hide their discomfort. Franklin sat near the end of the table, still sharply dressed, but his face had gone pale, lips pressed together, eyes hollow. He wasn't just watching his lies unravel, he was remembering. The late nights in Rivera's small office, soft yellow light warming the room. Rivera teaching him chess, each move a lesson in integrity. "Chess teaches us honesty," Rivera once said. "The board never lies." He'd sat by his mentor as Rivera explained code like bedtime stories, placing a guiding hand on Frank's shoulder. "You'll do great things, Frank," Rivera told him, "but never lose your heart." Frank had betrayed that. 3 years ago, while Rivera lay bedridden, Frank had overwritten the signature on the source code and taken full credit. He'd thought it was brilliant, efficient, untraceable. But one afternoon, Rivera had asked to see him. In the sterile light of a hospital room, Rivera didn't yell. He didn't accuse. "Frank," he said softly, "I don't need fame, but it breaks my heart that you chose this path." Just one sentence. It had haunted Frank ever since. Now standing across from Rivera's daughter, her eyes ablaze with the same quiet pride, Frank felt like the board had turned against him. Rivera wasn't just in the code. He was here, in Danny, in truth. Frank's hands trembled as he clutched the edge of the table. The weight of guilt crashed down, not just for the theft, but for the betrayal of the man who had given him everything. Knowledge, kindness, belief. He bowed his head, lost. Like a king cornered, no moves left. Danny stood tall, her voice steady but laced with sorrow. She had done what she came to do, restore her father's name. But the ache of his absence still echoed in her chest. She didn't hate Frank anymore. She only wanted the truth to be heard. From the back of the room, Leo Marshall stepped forward, hands in his pockets, eyes shining with quiet reverence. He'd seen the USB 3 days ago. He'd known the truth, but he let Danny speak for herself, just as she asked. "I verified the code and edit logs," Leo said, his voice calm but commanding. "The timestamps match. The original AI framework was the work of Rivera. Frank Lin committed an act of intellectual theft and betrayed the man who trusted him like family. I recommend his immediate removal as CTO." A cough broke the silence. A board member shifted uncomfortably. "We need a vote," he said, voice uneven. The vote was swift, unanimous. Frank Lin was stripped of his title. He didn't argue. He didn't deny. He simply stood, hollow-eyed, wordless, and walked out of the room, his back hunched like a fallen king carried off the board. Danny watched him go, a quiet ache blooming in her chest. She had taught him the final lesson her father never could, but it would never bring her father back. Leo turned to her, voice softer now. "Miss Rivera, TechSpire owes your father and you an apology. You deserve recognition. Would you like to return? A role on the AI team? Or," he smiled gently, Would you consider being CTO? I'd gladly be your assistant. Laughter broke the tension around the table. Danny smiled for the first time in that room but shook her head. Thanks, Mr. CEO, she said with dry humor, but I prefer mopping floors. Less drama. The room chuckled. She ran her hand over the worn chest box beside her, her eyes peaceful. I did what I came to do. My father didn't want trophies. He just wanted the truth. And now he has it. She pulled the USB from the laptop and placed it in Leo's hand. Then she turned and walked out without looking back. Leo watched her go, heart full of admiration. He'd thought she needed rescuing, but she was stronger than he'd ever imagined. She didn't want a title. She didn't need glory. She just wanted her father's name to be remembered. Leo held the USB like a relic, a legacy carved in code. Truth didn't need fanfare. Danny had proved that from move one to checkmate. In the hallway outside, Danny paused. She looked out over the Silicon Valley skyline and whispered to the wooden chess box in her arms. Dad, I did it. Frank stole your work, but he couldn't steal your honor. She stepped into the elevator, not to rise into power, but to keep walking her own path guided by truth, loyalty, and the quiet dignity of a daughter who kept her promise. The golden hues of sunset blanketed the small park near TechSpire's headquarters in a soft amber glow, as if time itself had slowed down to soothe old wounds. Oak trees swayed gently in the breeze, their rustling leaves harmonizing with the laughter of children and the distant calls of birds. Donnie Rivera sat on a weathered wooden bench, her father's worn chest box by her side, and a warm paper cup of coffee cradled in her hands. She wore a gray t-shirt and faded jeans, her dark hair pulled back in a high ponytail, but her eyes, deep brown and bright, carried a shadow of fatigue. The match against Frank, the boardroom revelations, it was done. And though she felt peace, something inside still echoed hollow. Footsteps crunched softly over the gravel path. Leo appeared, hair tousled by wind, his shirt untucked. He held a coffee cup identical to hers. Ms. Rivera, he said, voice light with that familiar hint of humor, though concern flickered in his eyes. I thought you might have snuck back to the 45th floor to mop the place clean. Danny smirked. Mr. CEO, I quit days ago. Or do you want me mopping your office now too? Leo laughed and sat down closer than usual, close enough that Danny could feel his warmth beside her. Her heart fluttered, and she tightened her grip on the coffee cup to steady it. Silence settled between them, not awkward, but rich with unspoken things. Danny gazed ahead, watching kids chase each other through the fading light. Leo watched her, admiration in his expression, shaded with something deeper. Not love, not yet, but understanding something rare and grounding. A breeze lifted a strand of her hair. Without thinking, Leo reached out and gently tucked it behind her ear, his fingers brushing her forehead. Danny flinched slightly, eyes meeting his. Both of their hearts skipped a beat. Leo pulled back quickly, mumbling, Sorry, wind messed up your hair. Danny gave a soft laugh, a blush rising on her cheeks. Didn't know CEOs were trained in hairstyling. He chuckled too, the tension between them dissolving, yet something remained, something warm and alive. You know, he said quietly, his voice near a whisper, I've been running TechSpire for years, but I never felt enough. Not really, not until I met you. His gaze held hers. You didn't just beat me in 19 moves. You reminded me that real honor, is worth more than power. Danny turned to him, surprised. Her heart thudded. She wasn't used to words like that. Not from a man like Leo, a CEO who could buy silence, influence narratives, crush opposition with a signature. But his eyes were searching, vulnerable, honest. She stared into her coffee cup, then replied softly, You don't have to say that. I didn't do it for you. I did it for my father. He always told me, even a pawn, if it never gives up, can flip the board. Leo nodded slowly. There was sorrow in his eyes, too. He reached to set down his coffee, and their hands brushed on the bench. Neither pulled away immediately. There was a spark in the touch, not electric, but grounding, human. I know, he said, voice hushed, but you did more than that. You made me look at myself, a man who thought he had everything, and see what I'd overlooked. People like your father. People like you. People who don't need front row seats to change everything." Danny swallowed hard. Her throat tightened. She thought of the dimly lit server room, her father's stories over chessboards, and the way Leo had listened, really listened, when she spoke of justice. She remembered the way he looked at her after she beat Frank, not with awe but pride, as if he believed she was the strongest person in the room. "Leo," she said quietly, placing a hand gently on his shoulder, "you helped me get into that tournament. You didn't interfere. You let me stand on my own. Don't ever think you're not enough. You're the only one who saw me as more than just a janitor." His eyes brightened. He placed his hand over hers, a brief but sincere gesture. Then, with a smile that tried to hide the emotion swelling in his chest, he quipped, "Ms. Rivera, was that a compliment? Careful, I might demand a rematch just to return the favor." Danny gave him a playful glare, but the corner of her lips curled into a real smile, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. "Dream on, Mr. CEO, she said. "You're still going down in 19. They laughed, their voices blending with the golden evening air. Danny looked at Leo, realizing he wasn't just the man who bent a rule to give her a chance. He was someone who understood the weight she carried, the grief, the pride, the quiet dream. Leo looked at Danny, seeing not just the woman who had once mopped his floors and defeated his ego on a chessboard, but someone who made him want to be real, to be better. As they sat closer, their shoulders touched. A small contact, but filled with meaning. Not romantic yet, but resonant. "What will you do next?" Leo asked gently, fingers brushing the edge of her father's chess box, as if trying to share in its memories. Danny looked out toward the horizon, her eyes lit with something bold. "I want to build something for people like my father, people who never got the chance, but still had something to give. Maybe I'll teach chess, or coding, to kids who've been overlooked." Leo smiled, his voice tender. "If you ever need someone by your side, call me. I'm terrible at chess, but I promise I won't let you down." Danny looked at him, her expression softening. Her hand reached out, gently brushing his as it rested on the chess box, a brief, silent thank you. "I'll think about it," she said quietly, "but don't expect me to go easy on you at the board." They smiled at each other, and in that moment, beneath the amber sky, they knew. They weren't here to rescue each other. They were here to walk forward, side by side, making the right moves, one game at a time. Just as Rivera would have wanted. You're watching Soul Stories exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment we read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. 1 year later, in the slums of southern Silicon Valley, a small blue building stood out among the dusty alleyways. A simple sign read, "Rivera Center Chess and Coding." Inside, children's laughter mingled with the soft clack of chess pieces and the rhythmic tapping of keyboards. Old wooden tables were covered in refurbished computers, and hand-drawn chessboards decorated the space. Despite the humble setup, the air buzzed with life. Danny Rivera stood at the center of the room, wearing a gray t-shirt, her brown hair tied high. She was showing a 10-year-old boy how to move a knight. "Remember, Teo," she said warmly, "the knight jumps in an L shape, but in life, you have to move straight." Leo Marshall, wearing an untucked shirt, leaned in the corner holding a box of donuts. He was trying to explain loops in Python to a 12-year-old girl. "Hey, Mia," he grinned, "coding is like chess. You've got to think 3 moves ahead." Mia gave him a side eye. "Uncle Leo, you lose to Miss Danny all the time. Don't teach me." The room burst into laughter. Leo sighed dramatically. "Fine, I officially retire from chess." This center was Danny's dream made real with Leo's help. After the journey to restore her father's honor, the man who had built TechSpire's foundational AI project, but was robbed of credit by Frank Lin, 3 years earlier, Danny decided to open a space where underprivileged kids could learn chess and coding. To her, chess wasn't just a game. It was a symbol of integrity, perseverance, and strategy, the values her father had passed on. And coding? It was a door to freedom, a way out of poverty, just like her father once used code to build a legacy. Leo, true to the promise he made in the park a year ago, became her partner. He raised funds from TechSpire investors, gathered donated computers, and even painted the building himself. But he declined every title. "I'm just Miss Rivera's assistant," he joked to sponsors, winking at Danny. She rolled her eyes, but in her heart, she was grateful not for the money, but because Leo understood her dream and respected it. Today marked the one-year anniversary of the center's opening. Danny stood before the kids holding up a pawn, her voice steady and deep. "The pawn is the smallest piece on the board, but if it perseveres, it can become anything: a queen, a rook, a knight, a bishop. Life's the same. You don't need a fancy title or fame. Just make the right moves like my father taught me." The kids nodded, eyes shining. One boy raised his hand. "Miss Danny, did you beat Uncle Leo again?" Danny laughed and glanced at Leo. "He's lost enough. Let him breathe a bit." Leo stepped forward, holding a wooden plaque engraved with the words Rivera Center, where every move is a lesson. He handed it to Danny, his hand brushing against hers. His brown eyes sparkled with sincerity. "Miss Rivera," he said softly, "this is for the kids and for your father. I just helped a little. You're the one who made it real." Danny took the plaque, her eyes misty, feeling the warmth from his touch. "Thank you, Leo," she said, voice trembling. "Not just for the center, but for always being here." The kids clapped, but Mia shouted, "Uncle Leo, do something! Don't just stand there!" Laughter erupted again. Leo feigned panic. "Mia, I'm trying." Then he turned to Danny, eyes slightly nervous, and dropped to one knee, surprising everyone. From his shirt pocket, he pulled out a wooden queen chess piece, delicately carved with small letters. "Miss Rivera, be my rival forever." The kids erupted in cheers. A few screamed, "Say yes, Miss Danny." Danny froze, her heart racing, eyes locked on Leo. In his gaze, she saw not just trust, but a promise. To walk beside her, not just on the board, but through every move in life. She stepped forward, fingers trembling as she touched the queen, letting her hand graze Leo's. Warmth spread between them. "Mr. CEO," she said teasingly, eyes twinkling, "you sure? Because I'll beat you in 19 moves, every single day dot." Leo grinned, took her hand, pulling her closer. His eyes gleamed. "I'll gladly lose for life if it's to you." The children screamed with excitement. Mia shouted, "She said yes!" Danny gave Leo a mock glare, cheeks flushed, but nodded, her eyes filled with warmth and gratitude. Leo stood, still holding her hand. In that moment, they both felt it, a heart's quiet trembling. Not just love, but a connection built through matches, touches, and shared purpose. Danny gently squeezed his hand and whispered, "Thank you for playing this game with me." The ceremony ended with a mini chess tournament. Danny sat down to play with a small boy, while Leo got pulled into another match by Mia and lost miserably in 15 moves. He dropped his head on the table and groaned, "Okay, I'm really retiring now." The room burst into laughter, and Danny shook her head, eyes soft as she looked at Leo. This place wasn't just for teaching chess or code, it was Rivera's legacy, where kids learned how to be human, how to make the right moves just like Danny and Leo had done. Under the warm lights, Danny looked at the children, at Leo, and whispered to the chess box in her arms, "Dad, I found my partner for this game." She leaned into Leo's shoulder. Together, they looked up at a sky full of hope, ready for the next move together.